You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
All right, folks, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're broadcasting live here from St. Louis. I've been saying for the last couple of years, any of you who watch this show, we've been emphasizing the importance of all elections, not just presidential elections, not just U.S. Senate, not just congressional, but also gubernatorial races, state races, and also local races. Every race matters, whether it's mayor, whether it's city council, whether it's school board. And so after we spent some time in Georgia, of course, covering the race of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock running for the United States Senate, I told you that we would actually be traveling to other cities in 2021, covering various races, talking to candidates about what's happening. And so that's what brings us to St. Louis. There's a mayoral election taking place next month, and one of the folks who is running for mayor, running for the second time, Tishaura Jones, who joins us right now. How's it going?
Good to see you. Thanks for coming to St. Louis.
So you ran last time, and that was for a lot of folks a frustrating experience. You had a number of African American candidates who were running, and none won. You came in very close in second there. This time around, there are 3 African Americans who are running as well. Total of 4 candidates.
Total of 4.
Total
right.
of 4. What do you think the black community in St. Louis has learned from the last mayoral election?
Hopefully they've learned that local elections matter and you need to show up for every election, whether it's dog catcher, city council, and obviously president. Hopefully we've also learned to coalesce around one candidate. While we still have 3 African Americans in this race, the thing that's different this time around is that we have approval voting. So people get to vote for as many candidates as they want to in the primary. And
so you have ranked voting.
It's like ranked choice, but they're not ranked. So the top 2 vote getters then go to a runoff a month later.
So, but with those who are voting, they're only voting for one person.
No, they can. In the primary, they can vote for as many candidates as they approve of. So there are 4 candidates on the ballot.
So a person can cast 4 ballots?
They can vote for all 4 candidates if they like them.
Wow. Now that's a little different.
Yes, it's different.
That's real different there. So with that in mind, what was the turnout in the last election?
28%.
So that means that 72% of eligible voters did not vote in the election.
Exactly.
So what have you been focused on since that last election? Because at the end of the day, I think you think about the race with Cori Bush. She was blown out by Congressman Lacey Clay. She then runs again, beats him the second time because they looked at what happened the first time, what they employed in the second campaign.
Yeah, so this time, well, the last 4 years, we've spent all that time just having conversations with people, telling them also about the current administration's record, and they've also seen that there hasn't been much movement. So we celebrated, well, not celebrated, but we marked 5 years since the death of Mike Brown, and people saw that, nothing has been done, or almost nothing has been done, based on the reports that we put together through the Ferguson Commission to address, systemic racism in the region, to address criminal justice reform. And so people are angry and people are upset. So hopefully they are incited to vote this time around. We also saw record turnout in the August primary where Cori Bush won. So hopefully we'll have that same sort of turnout, which was actually upwards of about 40%. So hopefully we'll have that same turnout on March 2nd.
So what has it been like? What has the messaging been like? Obviously, we're still operating in a COVID world, but what has it been like to get people to understand the importance of elections like this? Again, I mean, the reality is most elections, when you're in a presidential year, it's because of that level of energy and money, and you're being inundated with ads as well. Then there's a massive drop-off when you have other elections.
Right. So there's a drop-off, and so we have been going back to our supporters. I also ran in that election, so we have a database of people that we knew came out and voted. So we've been going back to those supporters and making sure that they know another election's coming up. So hopefully we'll see not the same turnout in August, but something close to it.
When you talk about, what has to change, you've been involved also in this battle in the last several years when it comes to your position as the treasurer. I've had Kim Gardner on as well. It seems as if there is a constant assault on black elected officials. I've had folks from the Black Police Union on as well, talking about those issues. And so race is dominant, if you will. I dare say 3 black candidates, a white candidate, but the 5th candidate still is, which is really the huge one, race in this city and when it comes to having power.
Yes, absolutely. Racism is in the center of all of our decisions. St. Louis is one of the most hyper-segregated regions in the country. If you drive I don't know if you've driven from north to south here, as soon as you cross Del Mar Boulevard, the atmosphere immediately changes. And so we have to address that. We have to address the systemic racism that led us to this point. We have to address that there are, just like investment in some neighborhoods are intentional, disinvestment in black neighborhoods has been intentional. And so we have to reverse that trend. And as far as our local media, it seems like they have an all-out assault on especially black women in this town, black women in leadership. As you look at the editorial board from our local paper, they have written nothing but crazy editorials about me, about Darlene Green, Kim Gardner, Cori Bush, the list goes on and on.
And so for the folks who are watching and listening, what are the demographics of the city? Because a lot of people out there assume they assume that St. Louis is a majority black city.
It used to be, but we are now majority minority. So we're about 46% black, 46% white, and everything else is Hispanic and Asian.
Now has that been because African Americans have been moving to other cities that in the county? In many ways, same thing we saw what happened in Atlanta, where suburban cities have grown tremendously because of blacks leaving the core of Atlanta.
Absolutely, absolutely. In the last census, they are projecting that we lost 21,000 African Americans since the last census.
Wow. Now, I interviewed Wesley Bell today, and we're going to be airing the interview later this month. And one of the things that he said is that he said that what he hears a lot from young folks is, I can't wait to graduate and leave. How are you going to address that? Because if you're having a drain on talent, the reality is that's really how cities die. It's sort of like churches. If that next generation isn't staying at the church, that church gets older, folks begin to die out, that church will eventually fade away because then there's simply not enough members to support it. What is your plan to stop that from happening?
Well, we have to provide opportunities for our young people to thrive. And right now, we don't do a good job of that. So that means we need to push diversity within our unions. St. Louis is a huge union town, and there are so many tables that I sit around with union leadership, and they don't look like me. So we need to push there. We need to take care of our industries. Right now, our industries are like biotech, healthcare, so how can we push diversity there? We have 2 flagship universities that train doctors that go all across this country, yet we aren't training our doctors that graduate from our local high schools. So how can we develop a pipeline to train the next generation of health professionals? We have a HBCU in the center of town. How can we lift up that HBCU to train the kids of the future so they can take these jobs and take my position someday? But we don't do a good job at providing opportunity for our young people to thrive and survive here.
Is it another huge problem that you have to deal with? And explain to folks, because you serve in the legislature as well, this weird relationship in this state in St. Louis where essentially the legislature wants to run the city.
Right.
Explain for folks who don't quite understand that dynamic.
Yeah, so our legislature tends to, they say that they love local control, but every chance they get, they take away St. Louis's local control. And so I think.
I'm sorry, hold up. You mean the people who say less government
Yes.
and big government and get out of our business? Okay, I'll just be checking.
Exactly. And I'm a recovering legislator, so I saw this in action when I was in the legislature. But I think that we don't do also a good job of building relationships with our legislators. I served with our current governor, and so if elected, I look forward to rebuilding that relationship. And I think relationships are primary, so we have to do the hard work. And also have them realize that if they try to destroy St. Louis, they destroy the state. We are the economic engine of the state. Between ourselves and Kansas City, we provide 2/3 of tax revenue for the entire state.
Wow.
So you would think that they would be pushing development and pushing things our way to help us instead of trying to hurt us.
You talked about biotech and healthcare. We've seen a number of Midwestern states lose their luster. When you talk about Illinois, when you talk about Missouri, when you think about Wisconsin, when you think about Pennsylvania, Ohio, a lot of people also, white folks getting older, passing away, younger folks leaving these states as well, losing their representation in Congress and other places like that. So from a business standpoint, what is your strategy to actually attract businesses, attract corporations? What type of, where's the potential growth on the business side that would actually cause folks to move here and stay here?
Well, I think one of the things we saw through the pandemic was the ability of people to work from anywhere in the country. And recently, Square has decided to relocate a lot of its employees from Silicon Valley to St. Louis. And so I've been talking with the CEO there and
Jack Dorsey?
Jack Dorsey and his partner, Jim McKelvey. And we were talking about how can we create an environment where 10 other companies from Silicon Valley want to follow Square to Midwestern cities, because we've also seen the birth of some other cities like Nashville and Indianapolis and Kansas City even. So we need to talk to the leadership in those cities, see what kind of changes they made to attract those businesses and try to do the same thing here. Because I am not a fan of reinventing the wheel or trying to come up with something out of the blue. We need to see what works and replicate it here.
Or what often happens is when folks are running, they say, if we could just go back to how things used to be. Because what used to be the dominant industries here in St. Louis?
The dominant industry used to be, we have a huge we used to have a huge auto industry. An auto plant used to be actually right next door to where we are right now. Boeing, or what used to be McDonnell Douglas, used to have a huge plant here, and now so they have other plants across the country. We still have some of that here, but not as big as it used to be.
And obviously, being in St. Louis, Anheuser-Busch, huge as well.
Right, yeah, but InBev bought Anheuser-Busch, and now they have a smaller footprint here too.
And so, in trying to make the connection to folks here to say a greater future, what has that conversation been like? What has it been like in talking to black voters and white voters who may say, okay, no, we have two different agendas here?
Well, I think the number one agenda for both black and white voters has been crime. Crime and public safety and criminal justice reform. We just saw one of the most violent years on record in 2020 here in St. Louis. We had over 260 murders, but also an issue for attacking crime and public safety. It has to be a regional approach, because when you're looking at St. Louis from outside, you don't see that there's a difference between St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and that the elected officials are different there. So we need to provide a united front on making sure that we're attacking our problems as a region, not just as a city, because it doesn't stop at our borders or the Mississippi River, right? Because we're right across the river from Illinois. So how do we engage our partners in East St. Louis and help East St. Louis build up and address poverty all around the region.
Well, the thing about what you just laid out, and when my interview with Kim Gardner today, she talked about the size of this city's police department and a massive number of police. And so every time you turn around, people say, oh, if you have this issue with crime, it would just have more cops. But what is the root cause of your crime issues here?
The root cause is poverty and mental health and substance abuse services. So police don't need to be the only answer when you dial 911. And St. Louis has the largest size police force of 10 other cities our size.
Okay, repeat that for the person who might have missed what you just said.
St. Louis has the largest police force of 10 other cities our size, even larger than Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, which are the same population. They have the smaller police forces than St. Louis.
Wow. So obviously, the idea of saying, hey, more cops is not the solution.
No, it's not. It's more social services. It's more it's more diversion programs. It's more the things that Kim Gardner and Wesley Bell are working on. It's making sure that, again, that cops aren't the only answer when you dial 911. Because also, St. Louis has more police shootings per capita than 100 cities in the country.
But you also have what has been described by both of those individuals I talk with, what they call one of the most racist police unions in the country.
Amen.
How have they been? I take it they are not a fan of you running for mayor.
No, they are not. They are not. And I served with the business manager, Jeff Rorda, when I was in the legislature. And I've told anybody who will listen, he does not have an audience in my office. They're going to have to change if they want to deal with me.
And so for folks who don't know, again, some cities have a strong mayor, council form of government. Some have a city manager form of government. What's the form of government here? What authority does the mayor really have?
So they say that St. Louis has a weak mayor form of government because I require at least one other vote to make any spending decisions through the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. But I submit that the mayor is only as weak as the person in that job. Because you can still have a weak mayor form of government, but a strong leader can do good things in that position.
When it comes to overseeing the police department, what is that like? Because what people often talk about, the issue is collective bargaining, those contracts. Right. That a lot of the problems that we have is when police unions dominate those particular contracts. When is the contract up in this city? And what are you saying to the people that you're going to make changes to the police department to deal with these police shootings?
So currently, as I understand it, the collective bargaining agreement is being negotiated as we speak. And that's with a small group of people that includes the personnel director, the director of public safety, and obviously the police union and a couple of others. And I'm not sure if they're going to reach their negotiations before we get to April 6th or April 20th, which is when the new mayor will be sworn in. But I know that there are some things that need to change within that agreement, especially related to discipline, which currently keeps us from holding officers accountable.
How so?
So there are some provisions with it. There are some differences between the policies and procedures in the police department, and there are provisions within the collective bargaining agreement that talk about discipline. And so those pieces need to come out. Because if you're talking about a collective bargaining agreement, you're talking about salaries, hours, things like that. But there's a discipline piece in there. So as I understand it, the way that there's like a time period that keeps us from holding cops accountable between like how many days a particular officer has been suspended versus it doesn't match up with the policy that's in the personnel department. And because it's different, there are loopholes, basically. And look, you just dealt with this. We talk about city having, issues financially, dealing with issues with crime. The city just settled for $5 million. Yes. A black police officer who was undercover, yep.
during the protest. White cops didn't know who he was, viciously beat him, and the city had to pay this black cop. They settled for $5 million.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to understand is, where are the fiscal conservatives in St. Louis? Are they angry with these police settlements, these police abuse cases?
I haven't seen them. I have not seen anybody be angry. There was another case that that also may be settled of a female officer who was killed while they were playing Russian roulette one night with other officers. So that's another pending case, and they tried to cover that up. So if there's any outrage, I haven't seen it.
That is, and what's interesting is, look, I mean, I cover stories all across the country. And I can tell you, I probably have done, the only other city I would dare say that I probably covered more cases of problematic police officers would be NYPD compared to St. Louis.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, if something comes up and it's not one of those cities, because I remember we did the story where they were busting these cops who were using racial epithets and other things in the Facebook group. Significant number of St. Louis police officers.
22.
And then you had a battle going on with the police chief as to whether or not those folks should go.
Yeah.
That has to be disconcerting if you're a black resident where you have folks who are unwilling to even get rid of racist cops.
Right. Or, you know, the other part of that is our civilian review board. We passed legislation to create a civilian review board or civilian oversight board. And the number of cases that have, none of the cases have been sustained. And it's a tricky way to describe it, because I did talk to the people there. There's a form that's supposed to be filled out when a citizen has a complaint against an officer, and that form is supposed to be shared between Internal Affairs and the Civilian Oversight Board, but only Internal Affairs is only using their form. So they may have thousands of complaints, whereas the Citizen Oversight Board only has like tens. It's like 42 complaints versus Internal Affairs has thousands or hundreds. Because when they say, well, why don't we have more complaints? Well, because the person didn't ask for that form.
Okay, so what the hell is the point of a civilian review board then?
Exactly.
And this civilian review board, who appoints them?
They're appointed by the Board of Aldermen and the mayor. But this is a communication issue. I don't fault the Civilian Review Board. I fault the Internal Affairs Division for not using the right form and not being a fair player here, because they know that the form exists, but the burden is on the person making the complaint to request the right form. How do they know?
So here's what I don't understand. Why is it the city doesn't simply stipulate, because the city oversees the police department? This is the form that you give.
It's in the ordinance that's the form that's supposed to be used, but.
Or how about this here? Okay, so when somebody makes a request, does the name of the person who they reach out to, is that required to be on that form?
I don't know.
So again, look, here's the way my mind thinks. If the Internal Affairs is giving people the wrong form, fine. From a city standpoint, require that Internal Affairs person, they have to put their name on the form. So if somebody says, this is the form they gave me, and it says Jim Jones, handed me this form, y'all then can go to Jim Jones and say, why in the hell did you hand the wrong form?
Exactly.
To me, that's how you fix that. I mean, because
you have to hold people accountable.
I mean, that's the game they're playing right there.
Exactly.
So how do you have an Internal Affairs, which is supposed to be investigating wrongdoing of police, pretty much saying, nah, we're going to try to cover up as much as possible? Would you say that probably is the greatest issue that's going to drive this election, this relationship between police and its citizens and accountability?
That's one of them, and addressing crime in our community. We have the reputation of being one of the most violent cities in America, and so when people look at coming here or relocating here, companies look at coming here, they're like, no, because if they type in St. Louis, and that's the first thing that comes up on a search. So no, I'm not going to want to go there if they're the most violent city in America. So how do we push back on that narrative? How do we take care of our people? How do we change that narrative to make people want to come here? But we have to take care of our people first.
And how are you proposing to change that narrative? Because the reality is that has been built up over a long period of time.
It has been. So because it's been built up over time, it's not going to change overnight. But I think a strong mayor with strong leadership skills who's going to be a strong champion for this region and for this city is what's going to change that narrative.
We talked earlier, you talked about having 2 flagship universities here. St. Louis University, Harris Stowe. When it comes to addressing these problematic issues here, how are you incorporating them into this? How are you having them as stakeholders at the table to address what's going on?
See, I don't think they've ever been asked to be at the table. So we have to bring them to the table. We have to bring everybody to the table, because it's not just the problem of city government. It's not just the problem of the churches. It's not just the problem of the schools. We have to bring everybody to the table to see how we're going to put our collective heads together to put a path forward for our region. We've done at least 7 or 8 different reports all saying the same thing, that people need more jobs and opportunity and workforce development and training, and we need to invest in North St. Louis. We need to address our school system. Our school system's fragmented, all of the things, right? And nobody's ever taken the reports and actually done something with them. So how do we take all of these reports, and of course, race is at the center of all of them. It talks about the systemic racism that's inherent in this region. So we need to take all of those reports, put them together in a strategic plan, and start addressing these issues. But everybody has to be at the table in order to do it.
Actually, I think probably what you ought to do is, if you running, what you should do is, you should have a bonfire. You should take every single one of those reports and burn them all.
Right.
Because here's the whole deal. If I don't care what it is, I don't care if it's a business, I don't care if it's a neighborhood, I don't care if it's dealing with the city. If all folks have done or issued reports, then the only folk who've actually gotten any work are the folks who write in the reports and the printer.
Right. Because this last one on economic development cost $800,000 to tell us what we already knew.
Okay, so who spent $800,000?
Not us. Not us. But it's from the development fees that they get through SLDC. It's a crazy setup.
That is crazy.
You pay me $800,000, I'll get you a report.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the folk who do these reports,
Right.
that sounds like that's the only people who are actually doing well.
Right.
What is the relationship? First, I'm gonna go back to the business relationship in a minute. I still want to go back to the college and universities. You talked about the poverty piece. You talked about that. You have these 2 distinct universities, and so how do you, or are they doing it? How are you driving folks from your school system to these universities, and maybe not just for 4-year degree, but 2-year programs, certification programs, where you also are helping folk build a skill set?
We're not. And we have more than 2 flagship universities. There's Maryville, St. Louis University, Washington University, Harris Stowe, and Lindenwood. So I started a program called the College Kids Children's Savings Account Program, and we open college savings accounts for all kids in public school from kindergarten up. And what I want to do as mayor is bookend that program. So we start the accounts at kindergarten because we're trying to increase families' financial capability, but also how are we addressing the needs of our kids as they're coming out of high school? So we should be matching them up with union apprenticeships or two or four year vocational school, or how are we using our existing university systems to really reach out to all of our kids to say, hey, you can come here for free or reduced tuition. But I don't think we're not pulling those two pieces together.
So it's just curious to me that if you have a fundamental problem in the city, you don't have a situation where you are involving all of the stakeholders. And so that's strange. So how in the heck can anybody think something's going to get fixed if you don't pull business, education, health, law enforcement together and say, we have a collective problem?
Right, exactly. You can't. And that's the thread that I've seen in cities across this country where they have already tackled these issues, where they're growing, right? These small Midwestern cities that are growing, they pull everybody to the table. But for some reason in St. Louis, even between the city and the county, we can't seem to do that. But that stops if I'm elected. I already have great relationships with elected officials in the county. And I have been pushing, that's the only thing that I've been saying. We need to solve our problems as a region, you can't just put it on the city. We have to do it as a region. Everybody has to be at the table because our destinies are linked.
Business. One of the things that I've heard from several people is that you have business interests who act as if they control the city and not elected officials. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Clearly, you agree.
Yes, I've seen that during this pandemic. We had 2 different health directives from the city and the county. For a while, you could still eat inside in city restaurants, but you couldn't in county restaurants because our county executive is a medical doctor and knew that it was not safe to be eating inside. But in the city, there are certain business people who were pushing the mayor to say, no, we need these restaurants open because, and I get it, I get it that, COVID was horrible for a lot of businesses, but
still is.
And it still is, right. But we shouldn't have different health directives based on, whether or not you're on one side of the street or the other.
Well, one of the things that, as you were talking about in this issue of crime, is there I think back to how I grew up in Houston. My parents were founders of our neighborhood civic club. Do you have an extensive neighborhood civic plan here in terms of where you are charging neighbors with creating clubs to control their own destiny, to be able to assist folks in whether it's dealing with issues with crime or dealing with economic issues? Because one of the things that I say often when we talk about these elections, that I explain to people that elections are the end of one process and the beginning of another. And that when you look at cities where they've actually been able to do some great things, it is because people also were challenged to have an investment in the change in the city. Mm-hmm. And so what is your plan? What is your strategy to do that? To say, look, y'all, you can't look to me to solve these problems. I'm going to need you, if you're living in this area, when you see something, to say something. If there's an overgrown lot, or if their trash needs to be picked up, I need you to be able to make that phone call or create the kind of civic-minded organizations in these neighborhoods to also change them while you're also trying to make changes at City Hall.
So it's real simple. We need to have more town halls with our neighborhood associations. In some parts of the city, you have active neighborhood associations, and in some, they're not that active. And so I plan on having town halls frequently, bringing all of the department heads with me So when we're sitting in front of, hopefully, you know, as COVID lifts, when we're sitting in a room with neighbors in that area, and they say, you know, we've got illegal dumping, or, you know, this lot is overgrown, or, you know, these are the issues we're having, then that department head is right there to handle that situation. And it's nothing new. It's not rocket science. It's just meeting the people where they are and addressing their problems.
And so when you talk about the areas where you don't have strong neighborhood associations, who lives there?
We do. African Americans.
So how do you change that? How do you change? Because first of all, you're going to need the neighborhood associations to have town halls.
Right.
So how do you change that? Are you charging church leaders? Are you charging community leaders? So what is happening there?
I think people will be involved if they see that someone is responding to their needs. And right now, they don't even see government responding to their needs. They don't see their trash picked up on a normal basis, their streets being swept. So if we start doing the little things that they expect from their government, I think that they will be more involved. Also, I think that we need to, we have a really high percentage of renters in the city. And so how do we change those renters into homeowners? And that way, that also engages people in neighborhood associations.
Now, do you have a high percentage of renters versus homeowners because you have low availability of houses to purchase? Is that because of the home foreclosure crisis, where basically large hedge funds went in and bought up allotments? We saw this really happen in Arizona, a lot of different places, where they bought up with the banks and allotments of 20, 25,000 homes, and they don't want folks to be homeowners because they're making more money of folks being renters.
It's a combination of that, and also a combination of redlining. And there's the racism again. There are homes just probably in this neighborhood where we're in now that if you purchase it, it won't appraise out because there are no comps, because there's been no lending in the neighborhood. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If there's no lending, there's no comps. If there's no comps, then it won't appraise out. So how do we push back on financial institutions to lend more in black neighborhoods? Because right now they don't. And I see the reports every year. I call these banks and credit unions to my table and say, what are you doing? You need to do more.
Okay, so I answer this, since you've been operating as a treasurer. Are the banks that are practicing redlining, is the city's money in those banks?
Some of it, yes. Some of it, yes. We have about 13 banks that we do business with. And I push back. We have to continue to push.
Who has the power to pull the money out of their banks?
The treasurer.
I mean, that was one of the things that Maynard Jackson did. One of the things that Maynard Jackson did when he said there were no blacks on boards of directors. He called the banks in. He said, look, y'all need to find some African Americans on your board of directors. And they said, well, there are none. We can't find any. And then he said, no, they exist. And they said, well, we're not going to place any. He then called the city treasurer in and say, pull the city money out of their banks.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, wait a minute. Because, look, at the end of the day, and every discussion I have, I don't care what it is, every discussion comes back to money. This is America. If you're not talking about the money, you're actually not talking about anything of substance.
Right.
That really is it. Dealing with the money aspect and challenging folks in that way. Same thing when you talk about growing black businesses. I go back to Maynard Jackson again for Atlanta, and I tell people all the time, I think, forget him being black mayor, I said probably one of top five all-time best politicians in America ever, because he understood how to use the power of the political office
right.
to change the economic conditions.
Exactly.
And so have you spent time studying him and others to say, if I am able to be elected, this is how I'm going to lead and operate?
Yes, absolutely. My father, who was comptroller of the city of St. Louis, was a protege of Maynard's. And one of the things that he's told me that Maynard said all the time is that I didn't have set-aside programs. I just set it aside.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about intentionality, right? Just like disinvestment is intentional, investment is intentional. And so we need to make intentional decisions to say that we're not going to give you tax dollars, our tax dollars for investing in neighborhoods that don't need another tax dollar. But we can give it to you over here where this neighborhood needs investment, and you're going to work with this community to make sure that investment happens with them and not to them.
See, I think one of the things that, again, looking at how to use the power, you look at how do you grow black businesses. Again, something else that Jackson did, said, look, the city pays 180 days. These black businesses cannot float their companies that long. Say it fine. You know that they are city approved and they're getting city contracts, requiring any bank the city puts money in to provide credit lines to businesses that have city contracts.
Right.
He said, you know we're going to pay them, so the money's going to come in. And so that's one of the ways to help those businesses grow by pairing. If you are able to get a city contract, you can be able to get a credit line from a bank that's already, that we're putting money in. So essentially, you're recirculating taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the practices I have now in the treasurer's office. If we have responses to RFPs and it doesn't include black businesses, I keep it open until there are black businesses that come to the table. And I am catching hell right now for giving a multi-million-dollar contract to a black woman-owned business who can do the work.
Right.
She did her bid. She won it outright on her own. But because she was also a campaign donor like everybody else, then all of a sudden there's an issue. But she does the work.
As if, I'm sorry, so is there a requirement in St. Louis that in order for you to bid on the contract, you can't be a campaign donor?
No, there's no requirement. Because if that was the case, then nobody would be doing it.
Nobody would get, right, nobody would get a contract.
Exactly.
See, I think one of the things that we've been talking about on my show really for the last year, and I've been using this hashtag, where's our money, and economic social justice, that what happens is we spend a lot of time about criminal justice reform, mass incarceration, and I keep saying, if you don't make the money a part of that, they got no problem with us talking about everything that don't have to deal with the money. But as Coretta Scott King said, when my Martin started talking about the money, that's when they killed him.
Exactly. That's when they killed him, because he talked about universal basic income. They talk about the March on Washington, but it was for the March on Washington for jobs
and freedom.
Right? They always leave that part off. So yeah, he was transitioning to civil rights in addition to civil rights, and saw where they intersected.
A few minutes left before we end this, and I spent lots of time, like I said, in Georgia. Folks have been, and numerous stories have been done, talking about the work of Stacey Abrams, Right in a Fair Fight, the New Georgia Project. Is there an entity or multiple entities who are looking to replicate that effort? Relying by saying, look, we can't wait on campaigns, we can't wait on politicians to do it, that we have to be able to mobilize and organize people. We saw the level of energy that took place after Ferguson. Is that happening, and what role are they playing in this election?
Yes, absolutely. That's Action St. Louis, led by Kayla Reed. And she's doing a fantastic job. If Action St. Louis had not been here pushing the envelope, educating our voters, we would not have seen the election of Kimberly Gardner. We would not have seen the election of Wesley Bell. And they were a key player in my race in 2017. They've endorsed me in this race in 2021. They have since launched what's called the People's Agenda. And they are going to use that to hold our elected officials accountable. They've been pushing on closing the workhouse, which is a jail that should have been closed years ago. It's uninhabitable. And so, yes, we have Action St. Louis on the ground, pushing the envelope, making changes in elections, in electoral politics, educating our voters, registering people to vote. And I see them becoming the next New Georgia Project.
There's somebody out there who is saying, I had no time for this. I don't trust none of y'all. I don't think any of this stuff is going to change. It's not going to have any relevance for me whatsoever. So the camera there on the left, look into that one and talk directly to that person as to why they must be engaged in this election, vote March 2nd. Let's talk directly to them. What would you say to them?
I would say two things. Number one, you should be able to succeed here regardless of your skin color, who you love, how you worship, or whatever zip code you live in. And right now, St. Louis does not provide that opportunity for you. And as mayor, I will provide that opportunity for you. And the second thing I would say is, you know, it's one thing to have a vision and a platform, but it's something totally different to actually implement that vision and platform. And that's exactly what I've done in the Treasurer's Office over the last 8 years. I'm the only candidate in this race that has the executive experience of turning a vision into a platform, the management experience of managing a staff of hundreds and a budget of millions of dollars, and the national relationships to put St. Louis back on the map. Because that's what we want, right? We want to make sure that St. Louis participates in the growth like other Midwestern cities our size, and it is our time, and you need a champion and a fighter in the mayor's office, and I will be that mayor.
Now, someone, and I've seen some of y'all comments. You know, y'all know during the show we look at what y'all say on YouTube and Facebook and Periscope and all that sort of stuff like that. Someone said that, Roland, there are 3 black candidates who are running, and why aren't you talking to all 3? Because only one called me. So the point I'm making is this here, and y'all know, we travel around this country. We reach out to people reach out to me as well. I said on the show, hey, we're gonna go to these places. And then when I reached out to Tishaura, I said, hey, love to sit down and chat with you about the run for mayor. The reason, and this is why I keep also arguing to folks who are watching, why you must support what we do, because the reality is MSNBC will not call her until she wins. Let me just go ahead and unpack that for y'all, okay? Same thing. These folks were not calling Cori Bush until she upset Lacey Clay. Y'all remember Justin Fairfax. I had him on my show several times when he was running for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. But it wasn't until he won Lieutenant Governor of Virginia that MSNBC called him, and he said that his first interview after he won was not going to be on Rachel Maddow's show, was going to be on my TV One show. He said because Roland called me when they didn't call me. And so that's why it's important for us to understand the power and the importance of black platforms, for us to be able, as the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, wrote on March 16, 1827, we wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. And so we certainly appreciate all the folks who watch, and that's why we want you to support what we do. And you can do so, of course, by going to our Cash App, $RM Unfiltered, PayPal.me/R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo.com/RM Unfiltered, Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. And of course, you can also mail to us, New Vision Media, Inc., 1625 K Street Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 2006.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.